Hi everybody, Rachel here from Treehouse Knits. Welcome to episode 17 of the podcast. And today I'm actually celebrating my 1-year Podiversary. It's September 6th, 2017, and it has been exactly a year ago today that I started this podcast, and I've been having so much fun. We're going to keep plugging along with it, and I just think it's been so much fun to meet all of you and interact with you on Instagram and in the comments below and on Ravelry. So thank you very much for your time for the past year, and I hope the next year you find some value in my little podcast here. Today's episode is a pretty big one. I've got a lot to talk about. We've got some admin. I'll talk a little bit about a question. We'll answer a question that was in the question and answer thread on the podcast Ravelry page. And we'll also talk about a couple finished objects that I have completed over the last month or so, some whips, as well as do a little imagiknitting with me. We'll also talk a bit about yak. I have a project right now on the needles that is just, oh, it feels so spectacular, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the fiber, and that is yak. So just having the yak on my needles inspired me to do a little more research on exactly what is yak, what's the history of yak, the fiber itself, the qualities of it. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. We'll also talk a bit about spinning. We're going to add that to the podcast because I recently acquired a small electric eel wheel, and then my mother-in-law graciously gave to me her Kiwi spinning wheel, which I've been having so much fun on. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. We'll finish up with a couple of purchases I made at the Michigan Fiber Festival, and then I have a recipe. I like to cook, and I'm assuming that some of you also like to cook, and I recently came across a recipe that uses up some of the plentiful zucchini that I have in my garden that I'm trying to find uses for, and it is so good. It's a zucchini pizza. So that will be at the end. So why don't we go ahead and just get started. What am I wearing right now? I have on my Come the Apocalypse, I Will Have Clothing t-shirt that I got from Fiberspace in Alexandria, Virginia. So I don't know if they still carry this, but at one point they were selling them, and I have two boys who are always talking about the zombie apocalypse and how we will prepare, and I thought they would have fun with this shirt and me wearing it, and I'm having fun. So anyway, that's what I'm wearing, and maybe they still carry this at the store there, I'm not quite sure. Just to let you know, we do have a podcast Ravelry page. It's Treehouse Knits Podcast. Check it out. On there I have a thread where I love it if you introduce yourself and let me know where you're from, and I will put you on our podcast map. You can also just go in there and click on the podcast map. It's incredible to see all the places around the world where people are watching this little podcast, and I just love the fact that it's kind of bringing us all together about one thing that we love so much, and that's fiber, and specifically knitting. Check that out. Also, if you have any questions that you have to ask, feel free to pop them in there. If it's something that I think I can answer quickly, I will. Otherwise, if I think a lot of other people may have the same question, I will put it on the podcast. So that leads us to our first section here, and that is in Q&A. The lovely Bead Tricks on Ravelry had a question about storing yarn, and she asked if it's important to if it's better to store yarn in hanks versus cakes. This is what's considered a hank. This one's kind of coming undone, but you'll notice that when you store a hank, the yarn is relaxed and it's not really being stretched. Whereas if you wind up a hank into a cake, the yarn is under a bit of pressure and it's pulling on the fiber. And if you store it in this way too long, you do run the risk of kind of stretching out your fiber. And it depends on the fiber content. Certain fibers stretch more than others. Say if you had some bamboo in your fiber and you put it into a cake and then you decided not to do the project, let it sit for a couple of years, I have a feeling that bamboo has now stretched out and it will be giving you a different gauge than what you are expecting it to be. So wool tends to bounce back, but I don't know after 2 years if you've caked some wool if it will stay stretched or not. Something to think about. So I would suggest, if you have wound up a hank into a cake and you've decided you're not going to use it after all, I would reskein it. And a lot of our skein winders have where you can kind of go backwards and they've got a handle on it and it will reskein your yarn, or just find an old chair and wrap it around. It's just a nice relaxing thing to do while you're watching TV. But yarn is expensive and it's an investment, and I would suggest that you put it back into the hank. So that question also led me to think about another question that I've heard people ask before, and I'm always curious how people store their knitting needles. So I thought I'd share with you the way that I share them, the way that I store them, based on a few years of trying different methods, and I'm finally to the point where I think I've got down what I like. Of course, I keep all of my needle sets in their original packages. I've got some Addies. Shop Luli makes these really cute holders for zings, so I got a zing set from her. That's Luli, L-O-U-L-E-I-G-H. I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. And show notes can always be found on my website at thknits.com. This is a pair of Royales, and I got them in the short tip with a 16-inch. I like to knit a lot of hats. I live in Michigan, and we do wear them here during the winter, 8 months of winter pretty much. So I've got a nice set of Royales, which I love because they have the metal tip and the wood middle to them. So I think that they're a wonderful needle. And then I do have a set of knit picks that I keep in its storage as well. I think these are the cherry wood knit picks. But what do I do with all the rest? My DPNs, my random sets that I've purchased. I've come to realize that in a lot of my projects, sweaters and hats especially, I'll not only need a longer length cord, I'll also need a shorter length cord, and sometimes I need DPNs if I'm doing sleeves or narrowing at the top of a hat. So what I've done is I've just gotten one of these boxes that are files. And I mean, this is like really rudimentary. It's almost embarrassing to show you right now because when I put it together, I was just kind of thinking, oh, I'll just see how this works and then I'll make it look pretty, and then I didn't. But you'll see each section I've labeled 00, 0, and it goes all the way up to, I don't know, 19. Are there size 19 needles? I don't know. But within each section, I put in not only the DPNs, but also the circulars of all different cord lengths that I have. So for example, in the 6s, I'll pull out my needles, and I happen to have a pair of Luca, I hope I'm saying that right, in 6. I've got some empty containers. Or empty packages. I like to keep my packages. It just keeps it in better order for me. And then I even have a pair of 6 Dreams DPNs. So that's just how I do it because I like to be able to search by size. So I'm curious how you all store your needles. I've seen people use those hangers that then they wrap the cords through. I don't know. That's just what works for me. So I thought I'd share that with you. So let's move on to some finished objects. My first finished object that I want to show you, if you've seen it, seen me on Instagram, I've posted a few times. And I'm Treehouse Knits on Instagram, by the way. And that's my Veronica Ardi. And there she is. Oh, this was such a fun project. It's an easy project, first of all. I think that this would be a great beginner project because there's no seaming, really. There's a little seaming at the end, but it's definitely easy seaming. There's not any shaping. It's a really neat design, and you'd think it'd be a little more complicated than it is. It's got a nice ribbed collar and this really pretty texture where every so often you're doing some purling in there. And then there's these holes at the bottom for your arms to go in. I just think it's a really clever construction. You're basically knitting a big flat piece, and at the end you're just seaming 2 sections on each side together to form the slots for the arm. The yarn that I used actually is from the sheep Ella, who you met, I think maybe it was episode 4. I went to Never Say Never Farm in Elto, Michigan, and I'll insert a picture here of Ella. So Ella is a beautiful CVM bond cross. We talked a little bit about CVMs in that episode as well. The one particular characteristic of the CVM yarn that I noticed is how springy it is. It's so fun to knit with because it's so forgiving and just feels so good in your hands. I've worn this a couple times in the house, and I have to tell you that it breathes and it just kind of keeps your temperature regulated. I wore it last night at our, briefly when I started to get a chill at our knitting guild meeting, and it's just super comfortable. So I know I'm going to wear that a lot this winter. And I think that's all that I wanted to tell you about it. It's a pretty, it's a lot of knitting, but you're using worsted weight. So in terms of a sweater, it does go fast. So I highly recommend it. Highly, highly. Okay, so the other projects I wanted to share with you that I finished. I live about an hour and a half away from a really nice yarn store in Owasso, Michigan, and it's called the Heart of the Mitten. I went there, a few weeks back with my folks. We took a little road trip, and they carry actually Dale. I always thought it was pronounced Dale yarn, D-A-L-E, but I think it's actually Dale. So if there's anybody out there who speaks Norwegian, I think it's Dale yarn. I've never really knit with that yarn, and I know that there are a lot of people that really love that brand. So it was really fun to kind of see all the different yarns that they carry. And they're actually the distributor of Dale yarn in the US. So I thought I would knit my nephew, Soren, who was just born a couple months ago, a sweater, since Soren is named after my great-grandfather, who was from Norway, and I've heard amazing stories about him my whole life. So I wanted to knit Soren something Norwegian. So I picked up the Dale Lurke Plus yarn while I was there. Here's the tag. Maybe it's Lurke Plus. I don't know. I would really like to be able to speak Norwegian. But that's the yarn. It's 53% merino wool, 47% Egyptian cotton. And I made the gift wrap sweater. I got 3 colors. And I just love how it turned out. The buttons I picked are just really simple navy blue plain buttons. And it's a navy blue, gray, and this yellowish green color. I ended up, well, first of all, let me talk about the sweater. What a great pattern by Karina Spencer. It's so adaptable. Here's the picture of what the model sweater is like. You can do it stripes. You could do it in solids. It would be super cute. I changed it out so the sleeves had some solid. Actually did that because I had 2 skeins of the navy and only 1 of the gray. So I did it that way. It's pretty much, I mean, you knit the whole body, then you knit the sleeves down, and then you add the button band. Super great pattern. And from what I've heard, mothers really like this sweater pattern. It's really wearable, easy to put on, and it stays on. So I made that for Soren. I had some yarn left. So I really wanted to make him a Norwegian style cap. When I looked online, I thought the snowflake pattern would be a lot of fun to do for him. And I found Carissa Knits Snowflake Hat. It's on Ravelry, and it directs you to her blog from 2007. Looks like this, Carissa Knits. And what I really liked about the pattern was that she includes charts for all sizes. So if you wanted to knit baby all the way through adult, have everybody have matching hats. I don't know, maybe we only do that in the cold climates, and some of you are laughing, but I think it's kind of cute for a family to have the same hat. And we do wear hats here in Michigan, like I mentioned. So let me show you how my hat turned out. If I can find the hat. My goodness. Okay, the hat fell down on the ground. Here's the cute little hat. And I ran out of blue by the time I got to the top, so I put some of the yellow at the top. I hope it fits him really well, but what a cute set. And you know, not a lot of yarn and you end up with something fun like that, I highly recommend this yarn. It felt so good in the hand. I think that it's going to wear well. I will definitely find out from the mom, my sister-in-law, if it does wash nice, but I'm just really pleased with this set and can't wait to give it to Soren, to little Soren. So that is the gift wrap sweater and the snowflake hat. So check those out. I stored them all in my Hopkins Sewing Studio bag, Chicago version with the L and the Chicago highlights. The inside is the CTA line. Reminds me of my time that I lived in Chicago for almost a decade. So those are my finished objects that I wanted to share with you. Moving along to imagiknitting and works in progress. I just recently heard a couple of words that I thought were very fun. I'm a word person. I like to learn definitions of words that I've never heard of, and I think it's fun when Webster every year says what words they're adding to the dictionary, and I just think words are really interesting to study. And I've heard a few people now say imagiknitting, and it totally makes sense. It's the time when we're trying to figure out what our next projects are going to be, and we're imagining what different yarns would look like together in certain projects, and we're really trying to find that special yarn or yarns that marry perfectly with the pattern that we want to make. So I have been doing some imagiknitting. Now, the last month or so, I have been watching people make that Sunset Highway sweater. I don't know if you've seen it. I'll plop in a picture right here. That sweater I think is so fun, and this year I'm really trying to knit a lot from my stash. It's kind of a little fun thing that I'm putting on myself to come up with unique ways to use what I have already in patterns that I'm seeing are coming out and that I love. And sometimes what happens is when you put certain parameters on yourself, like you can only use yarn from your stash, all of a sudden you create something that I think is better than if you would have gone out and bought the yarn that you think would be perfect for it. I don't know if that makes sense, but I know when I'm having a creative downtime, if I just put a few little, what's the word I'm looking for? Just some parameters where, you know, I can use this, but I can't use this, then it spurs my creativity and I come up with something. So for the, so going back to Kaitlyn Hunter and her beautiful Sunset Highway sweater, I wasn't buying the pattern, and then all of a sudden, I think it was this last weekend, she had 20% off all her patterns. So I went in and I saw this, I purchased that, and I also did not realize that she was the designer of the Ora shawl as well. And when I saw that, that's another one that I've been looking at and thought was really unique. I'll just put a picture of it right here. I'm sure you've seen it. But I went ahead and bought that pattern too, because I think both of those patterns, they don't use several skeins of yarn. They use a couple skeins of one colorway, and then you put in other colorways with it, which I have a lot of. I don't have a lot of sweater quantities in my stash, but I do have a lot of 1 and 2 skein match sets kind of things. So here's some of the imagiknitting I've been doing with the Sunset Highway and the Ora shawl. For the Sunset Highway, I thought that I had it all figured out using these colors. So in my stash, I've got all different little remnants of different dark grays and charcoals, and if you weigh it up, it does add up to a full skein, as well as I've got some solid blacks too. So I thought that I could use this. This is actually, the colorway is London Fog by Leading Men Fiber Arts. I have several skeins of this, and I thought it would be fun to combine it with this wild skein, which is called Color Run from Destination Yarn. And then this really bright hot pink. It's called Sorry Not Sorry from Hedgehog Fibers. It's their sock yarn. So I thought that this these colors together would make a really cool Sunset Highway. Well, then I started to think, boy, I really like when the body of that sweater is in a speckled yarn, but it does take 2 skeins of the speckled yarn, and I don't have a lot of 2 skein speckled yarns, but the ones that I do, I thought I'd pull out what I have and see how it works. I've got 2 skeins of Teacup. This is Hedgehog Fibers in Teacup, which is one that I fell in love with when it came out, and I purchased it. And I thought I could combine it with this, those dark grays that I saw, and then I have Oracle in Hedgehog left over. So if I pick them all up for you, sorry, these are the colors. And now that I'm looking at them on the camera, I think I would actually prefer the gray around the base of the body. So who knows what I'll do, but that's a little of the imagiknitting that I've been doing for that Sunset Highway sweater. The other imagiknitting, like I said, was the Aura shawl, and I think I've come up with what I'm going to do for that. I have a couple skeins of this Allegria, Monos Allegria. I have no idea what the colorway is because both the tags are off, but I was having a hard time looking in my fingering stash for anything that would match this. And then I thought, well, why don't I look in my sport weight, DK weight, and I've got this Swan's Island in this cool kind of navy blue color. It's looking a little there. It looks a little bit better. So I thought that would look good for the 2 colors. And then the accent colors, just going to hold one of each here. The accent colors, I thought I would pop in this light color. This is a Swan's Island that I had some left over that I would have enough yarn for the project. And then I've got this blue, which I thought there is blue in the, I don't know where it is. I thought that would be kind of cool together with the navy blue, the light blue, the Monos multicolored, and then that Swan's Island pink. So that's what I'm thinking for the Aura shawl. Is that how you guys kind of look at your stash and do your imagiknitting? That's how I do mine. We'll see if it actually comes to fruition and I actually start those, but I thought it'd be fun for you to just kind of see what I'm thinking right now. Okay, so yeah, imagiknitting was a word. Another word I heard recently was cold sheeping, and that's when you decide you're gonna cold sheep. You're not gonna buy any more yarn. That's cold sheeping. You're going cold sheep, I guess. So I guess that's kind of, what am I saying? I'm not ever cold sheeping. I'm always sheeping. Okay, so the only work in progress that I thought I'd share with you, of course, I'm still knitting socks, although I haven't been really into socks. And I've noticed a lot of you haven't been into socks lately too. I think we all OD'd on socks together. I'm sure I'll get back to them. But I've got my socks occasionally going, and then I've got my granny stripe blanket as well downstairs that I pick up occasionally when I have nothing else to knit on. But the other project that I'm working on, so I got done with the Veronica sweater, and that was just a really worsted weight, heavier, woolen spun kind of yarn. So I shouldn't say it's heavier, but it's just a chunkier weight project to work on. And I really felt like just working with a little bit more finer yarn. And I got from Bijou Spun this Lhasa Wilderness Yak. It's 75% yak, 25% bamboo. Now, I've only worked with bamboo one other time, and that was a sweater. I used a Blue Moon Fiber Arts, I think it's called Woo-Boo, gorgeous skein, or gorgeous skeins, I should say. I bought a sweater's quantity. This was back when I really didn't understand fibers at all. I just was going by touch, and I just want something soft. So I bought it, and I started to make, I think it was my second sweater I'd ever made. It turned out fine. It took me a good 2 years to finish the thing. I went to block it and laid it out, and it stretched double in size in length. It was hilarious. And I thought, well, maybe it'll bounce back. It didn't. And I'll never use bamboo again in a sweater. So this having only 75% or 25% bamboo, 75% yak, I thought I can't go wrong with a hat. This colorway is called Mice and Men. and it's a real neutral colorway, which is a little different for me, and I love it. It's grays and some taupes and browns in there. Really beautiful, and I thought it would make a really pretty, a really handsome man's hat. I shouldn't say pretty. So I kind of loosely went with the sockhead hat pattern. I say loosely because I added extra stitches for my family's big heads, and the women in our family have lots of hair, so if it goes to a woman, I need to make sure it's big enough for that. And so I cast it on, I knit a couple of inches or so, then I did a purl ridge, I just purled all the way around, knit another couple inches of ribbing, and then I flipped at the purl ridge so you can see kind of where that purl ridge is. When you put the purl bumps in there you can see it a little better, it just makes the hat fold over easier. And then I did a row where I tacked it down every 5 stitches instead of knitting it in every stitch, which is just time consuming and I don't think it's necessary. I just would knit 5 and then tack one down, knit 5, tack one down. And now what I did was then I'm now holding the yarn double and I'm just pulling from the inside and the outside. It looks like a mess, but it really isn't. Let me just clean it up here a little. You can see I'm pulling from the inside and the outside at the same time. And I am playing a little yarn chicken to see how much I can knit. I hope this doesn't turn into a headband, but you never know. But oh my gosh, this yarn is so soft and so wonderful. Yak, I think what is happening here is the bamboo is giving this a bit of a silky shine. And maybe the yak is too. But the yak is so incredibly soft. I have a feeling that it's going to be so incredibly warm. And that kind of led me to wonder more about the qualities of yak. First, let's talk a little bit about Yak History. A lot of the information I'm going to share with you I found in the Fleece and Fiber Source Book by Deb Robeson and Carol Acarius, as well as on Bijou Basin's website, which has a wealth of information about their fibers, including yak that they have on their land. So a little bit about yak history. Present-day domestic yak are part of the bovine family, which also contains everyday cattle, things that are considered bovine. They're descended from wild yak, the present-day yak, that were crossbred with domestic cattle and tamed by ancient people of the Himalaya Mountains in Asia. The history of Asia's yak industry is at least 5,000 years old. Because of the yak's value as a beast of burden and its products of extremely rich milk, valuable woolen hair, hides, horns, and incomparable quality of meat, the taming of yak led to progress, prosperity, and economic development in those areas. The people of Tibet, as well as other areas of Asia, are virtually totally dependent on their yak herds. And like the Native Americans and the bison, these indigenous peoples use the animal to its fullest. So they use the hair for spinning, weaving, and felting, as well as to produce ropes and rugs. The milk is used for anything you'd use dairy, so with like milk, yogurt, and butter. And then the meat is a staple of their diet. They also use the horns and hides and the bones, and even the yak dung is burned for fuel. Here in North America, the first yak were imported in the 1920s. However, almost 100 years later, we still have only a few thousand animals in the United States today. And that's what really makes places like Bijou Basin really special, I believe. So what about yak and the yak in general? If you look at a yak, they really have that classic old world appearance. They have the handlebar horns, the large shoulder humps, kind of like a bison. They have tails that look sort of like a horse, and they have kind of a skirt of hair that hangs down their sides almost to the ground. A full-grown yak can weigh in at almost 600 to 800 pounds and stand 4 1/2 feet tall at the shoulder. A yak bull can weigh anywhere from 1,200 to 1,500 pounds and stand 5 1/2 feet tall at the shoulder. It takes about 7 years for a yak to fully mature, and yak bulls are typically ready and able to breed by the age of 3, while the heifers can conceive at the age of 2. Yak will readily crossbreed with other bovines, with the resulting offspring having the better qualities of both species. It takes about 8.5 months for a yak to have a baby. So let's talk a little bit about yak fiber. So the yak fiber, there's 2 different types of hair. The first is the outer hair, which is called the guard hair, which is longer and coarser, and it's really strong. The guard hair does grow over the entire animal. The longest and strongest guard hair is found in the tail and the skirt. The second type of hair that the yak produces is the short, fine undercoat they call the down hair, which is produced by the animals during the winter, and it is an incredible insulator to keep them warm. Yak living in cold climates will produce 1 to 2 pounds of down annually. The down is shed in the spring and is harvested by combing. So because the guard hairs are so coarse and they're really strong, we usually card them and then spin them worsted, and then plying them together creates a yarn that you can braid into ropes and belts or used in weaving to make really strong bags and rugs. The down, however, has a diameter of 14 to 16 microns, which is comparable to cashmere or camel in its softness. And that fiber is what I'm using in my project. And I can tell you it is so soft. I think it's actually softer than the cashmere that I have in my stash right now. So I highly recommend you search out some yak if you want to have a really wonderful experience with such a soft, beautiful fiber. And do check out Bijou Basin Ranch and all of the work that they're doing to create roving and yarn for hand spinners and knitters alike. I wanted to talk a little bit about spinning. The last couple of months I have been really having fun with a couple of spinning wheels. The first one, if you listened to the last podcast, I talked briefly about how I purchased an electric eel spinning wheel, and I have it sitting right here. I thought I would just show it to you. So what it is it's, I actually heard about it several months ago. It was I believe it was a Kickstarter that I read about too late. I was thinking that I would be interested in an electric wheel, but I wasn't sure if spinning is something that I would enjoy doing, and I didn't want to, well, I couldn't invest in an electric spinning wheel that was over $1,000 because that's how much a lot of them are. So when I saw this Kickstarter and I read some of the reviews and just some comments on the electric eel spinning wheel podcast group on Ravelry, I decided to just put my name in, and if more came available, then I'd get an email and I could decide then. Well, I got the email about a month or so ago, and I just jumped on it. This is the wheel. You put your yarn, or you put your fiber in the hole here, and it's got, this is the whirl, and these are the bobbins. Everything is kind of a bamboo plywood, I believe. I don't know exactly, but it's pretty sturdy considering the price. It has an on and off switch, and you turn to the right to make your plies, and then when you want to ply together plies, you turn to the left. It plugs in. It's got a pedal similar to a sewing machine, and this is how you control the speed. And this also is the tension. This actually goes around the bobbin, and this is your tension. I found this so helpful in practicing how to draft and not worrying about moving my feet at the same time as drafting. And I really have had a lot of fun on this. So some of the first yarns that I made on it, I posted on Instagram. This was my very first skein right here. And I was just practicing lots of thick and thin, bumpy, lumpy. And then I had a loop bump. That was the other fiber that I had. And this is what my loop bump turned out to be. Getting a little bit better, a little more even. Well, then my mother-in-law came for a visit, and she brought with her, this is about a month after I started on the electric eel wheel, she had an extra spinning wheel that she wasn't using much, and she offered to give it to me. So of course I jumped on the chance. Thank you so much again, Mom B, for the spinning wheel. It's a Ashford Kiwi. It's sitting over here. I'm looking at her right now. Her name is Violet, and I'll put a picture in right here of her. Okay, so on that wheel, I feel like the electric wheel gave me confidence to just jump right in and try spinning on the Kiwi. And I had a, it was a ball of roving. I think it's roving, or maybe it was like a combed top. See, I'm still learning what these are, but I'll put a picture here of what it looked like. And that's from Stonehenge Fibers. I picked that up when I went and visited the mill over the summer. And this is what that turned out to look like. So I'm getting there, I'm practicing, I'm having so much fun. This was another one that it was just kind of more of an art yarn, I guess, with lots of different fibers in there. But I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I find it's really relaxing to just kind of sit down at the wheel and play, and you can listen to an audio book or watch TV. My son was up here working on some artwork, and we could talk while I was spinning, and I could help him. It's just, I've really enjoyed it. So if you, I highly recommend, if you are interested in learning how to spin, you go for it. The thing that was keeping me from doing it mostly was the price of the wheels, and I didn't want to invest in something that I didn't even know if I'd enjoy doing. And I really enjoy doing it. Since then, I have found that on Facebook, there are a couple of used fiber equipment groups that you can join, where people post from all over the country, here in the United States, that is, spinning wheels, looms, things that they're wanting to sell. And you can find spinning wheels, I think looks like good beginner spinning wheels for under $500. A lot of them are in the $300 to $500 price range. So that is my spinning that I just want to share with you, and I'll keep posting how I'm doing on Instagram and share with you occasionally how the spinning is going. One other thing I did want to mention is over the weekend, I'm sure you were aware of. If you weren't, I'm sorry you missed it. Craftsy was doing a free streaming any of their classes this on Labor Day. It was on Monday. So I went ahead and listened to and watched J.C. Boggs Faulkner's class called Drafting from Worsted to Woolen. Whoa, that was a great class. I highly recommend. She talked about, I think it was 4 different ways to draft, and then she shows you what the yarns look like in the end using the different draft techniques, and she was an amazing teacher. I'm gonna look definitely for more classes from her. Okay, so that is my spinning. Now let me talk a little bit about Michigan Fiber Festival. Had a great time. That was a couple of weeks ago here in Michigan. I really, as usual, I enjoy looking at the animals the most, I think. And we went on Friday, which was the day where a lot of the animals were starting to arrive. The main thing, I walked around, had a great time. I just didn't really need any more fiber or any more yarn. My mother-in-law also gave me a bag of fiber that I can use to practice and spin with. So I didn't feel the need to really go buy that kind of thing. But when excuse me while I turn, I got to the booth where they were selling Horshaw woodwork stuff. I realized that I wanted to pick up a couple of his sock blanks. He's actually a woodworker, and I'll put a link in the notes where you can buy his, he makes really beautiful yarn bowls, I think yarn caddies, needle caddies, and sock blockers. But he actually uses that material that it's an expensive material that decking is made out of, because you're putting a wet sock on here to dry, and that just makes sense. So I got the 2XL size, which is my husband's foot size. I needed a sock blocker for his big feet. So I got this, and then I saw one of the things I want to do more this fall is knitting some mittens. I want to do some color work mittens, and he sells mitten blockers. And how it works is you put the mitten on and then you insert this in the thumb. I got the medium size because that's pretty much the size gloves I'll be making. But isn't that cool? You can do right or left. I actually got the pair, but that was my big purchase at the Fiber Festival here in Michigan in Allegan. Had a great time, and that really was it. I didn't purchase much, which is a good thing in some ways because I have plenty of yarn to work with. The last thing I wanted to share with you, I said I was going to share with you a recipe, and I will put the link below to the recipe that I used loosely, because it's a recipe where you can kind of go any direction you want. It's a zucchini pizza recipe. We were getting so many zucchini out of our garden this year, and they were gorgeous, and I like zucchini. So I was looking for different ways to use it, and this zucchini pizza popped up, and I had all the ingredients in the house, so I went with it. I just had, sometimes I buy store-bought frozen rolls of pizza dough. So I defrosted one of those, spread it out. I took some of my homemade pesto that I had in the freezer from last year. I spread that on the dough, and then you just put zucchini pieces on top. The recipe recommends that you cut up your zucchini first and salt it and let it sit for half an hour. I did that, and a lot of water came out, and the recipe says they recommend to do that. I think I recommend to do that too, because it really got rid of some of that extra moisture, and it intensified the zucchini flavor. So you put the zucchini on there, some goat cheese, and then you slice up lemon slices really thin, cut them in half, and just spread those on the pizza. Those were the only ingredients. I baked it, at 450 for like 15-20 minutes. It's an incredible pizza. You have to try it. If you're trying to get rid of zucchini, stop making the bread, try this pizza. Even my kids liked it. So if you have any recipes for zucchini that you recommend, feel free to put them down below, because I'm still trying to use up zucchini and tomatoes. It's been a wonderful summer for our tomatoes here in Michigan, and I've been enjoying tomato sandwiches, and we've made some garden relish out of the tomatoes, but always looking for interesting ways to use tomatoes as well. I think that's it for the episode today. If you have any questions, pose them down below or put them in the Ravelry podcast group page. I love to read your comments below. If you liked my video, feel free to give me a thumbs up. I appreciate that too. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Treehouse Knits.